In an earlier video, we talked about how squares are different from circles, hedgehogs are different from space stations, so it makes sense to use different words for these different things. We also agreed that motion in one direction is different from motion in more than one direction, so even though English, oddly enough, uses the same word go for these different kinds of motion, in Russian we'll use идти to talk about motion in one direction, and ходить for motion in more than one direction, round trips or aimless motion. There's another distinction many languages make, going on foot without using a vehicle versus riding or going by vehicle. Russian makes this distinction too. So, to talk about being on your way somewhere on foot, we'll use идти, for example, «Куда ты идешь?» «Иду в кафе». But to talk about being on your way someplace by vehicle, we'll use the verb ехать. For example, «Куда ты едешь?» «Я еду в Москву». In this context, we're clearly not going on foot. You don't want to have to walk all the way to Moscow, so you'll get there by some sort of vehicle. Let's look at the forms of this verb ехать. As often happens, you can't predict the present tense forms from the infinitive, so you want to be sure to remember that the present stem is ед. Я еду, ты едешь, он или она едет, мы едем, вы едете, они едут. Now, take special care with the stress here. All these forms have the stress on the first syllable. This is especially important with this word because if you stress the ending of the ya form, well, what does an unstressed ye normally sound like? It would be reduced to sound like an e, and then yedu will start to sound like idu, and before you know it, you've told your friends that you're walking to Siberia. So be sure to distinguish carefully between the end stress of idu, идешь, for being on the way someplace on foot, and the stem stress for еду, едешь, for being on the way by vehicle. Now, one more note about the context for these verbs. What if you're headed somewhere else in the same town? For example, on my commute when I lived in Moscow, I would walk to the bus stop, ride the bus, walk to the subway, ride the subway, then walk to the office. Well, let's not split too many hairs here. A good general guideline is that we'll use ехать, the vehicle verb, to talk about being on the way to other cities or countries, someplace clearly too far to walk to. For example, в Омск, в Россию, на дачу, or when you mention a vehicle. But informally, for many trips around the same town, we'll just use идти, в кино, в магазин, на концерт. Summing up, идти and ехать both mean unidirectional motion. In English, being headed someplace or being on your way are often good equivalents. Идти is used when no vehicle is involved, or often for short distances within a town. Ехать is used when you're going by vehicle, most often when talking about going out of town or to another country or city. Pay attention to the stress. Remember that the present tense forms of идти have stress on the ending, but the forms of ехать have stress on the stem.